you're going to learn things and you're going to go back to that initial framework and you're going to tweak that framework and update it like you would a code base, right? Over time, you have some kind of framework to build a website or whatever. Over time, you're going to change things. You're going to use a different type of plugin. You're going to use, the standards change or things get deprecated. And how do you support the scaling and growth of your client over time? How do you build a team around them? Or an individual, and that maybe grows into a team. How does that happen? Those snap onto that. So I have all that figured out. So when I sit down in a meeting, I can give a pretty good ballpark of what something's going to cost. I can speak, I can listen and figure out what pieces of that they need. Like the all-inclusive, that's going to be different for every client. But the last month specifically, they had a huge initiative to update all 3 websites pretty majorly. They brought on board other agencies to help them, CROs, and it was this huge initiative to improve conversions and get the websites in tip-top shape. And these last few weeks it was so crazy that my wife hasn't seen me much on the weekends either. So I had one developer working on one site, I had another developer working on the Shopify site, like one developer on the original site, Shopify site, and then the new site. That was me. I took that one. Like, okay, I'll do this. It looked like I could, yeah, no problem. There's a lot. It's rebuilding how the checkout works and is designed, a complete rebuild of that and the product page and home page, some things, which what turned out to be a lot, but hi, I'm Matt Levenhagen, founder of Unified Web Design, Unified Plugins, and your host of the Builders Podcast. Here on the Builders, our goal is to uncover the first principles behind building businesses, products, and services. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. And if you find value in our content, a like, share, or review is always appreciated. Let's dive in and explore the roots of innovation and progress together. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another The Builders. Today, you are joined by just me. This is a solo episode. I am Matt Levenhagen, the host, and today the host and guest all wrapped into one. So today we're going to be talking about flexible and adaptable service frameworks. Now, when I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for an episode and I'm sketching out or, throwing out some ideas to myself, I sometimes come up with things like phrases like that I'm like, is that a thing? Is that? So I put it in Google, and now Google's AI brings back something for it. It actually, encapsulates that, says, flexible and adaptable service frameworks are this. And it was in line with what I was thinking. But as I'm doing some Google searching, because I really want to know, like, has anyone said this particular thing, these words in this order to describe anything? And then talking to my chatbot, of course, ChatGPT, kind of exploring that idea. I kind of, ChatGPT probably as for a lot of people now is a great brainstorming tool. And so when I'm coming up with ideas, what I actually did today, and I come up with the ideas on the spot. So only in the last hour or two, or this morning. But I opened up the voice chat and I just had this conversation. This is my idea. This is what I'm thinking about, and kind of work through that. And I got done. And I got to flexible, adaptable service frameworks, building that. And it's relatively unique, but I think it's a thing. Because services aren't a new thing. So I'm sure a lot of people have flexible, adaptable service frameworks, whether it's called that or not. So anyway, so that is what we're going to talk about today. For those of you that have followed me for the last 4+ years, and I've talked about my agency and my business over that time frame, we're in the 7th year now. And last time I had a solo episode. I do solo episodes every I don't know, average 4, 5, 6 weeks. I try to throw one in there to talk about what I'm doing and what I'm building and the lessons from what I'm building or have built. And last time I did a solo episode, I talked about my products and how I'm building products alongside services. Now, services is most of our bread and butter, if not a majority, if not almost all. but I wanted to talk about products. But today I wanted to, as I sat down, I'm like, okay, let's talk about building something that I've done in my agency. And of course, over the years, even from the beginning, I've had packages and productized services and things where when I get on a call with somebody to talk about doing business, whether it's a client or another agency working with them, I already have a framework in mind. I already have even my pricing structures pretty much fleshed out in my head, at least a ballpark, right? And the thing with that is that when, the contracts I used in the beginnings, 6 years ago, whatever, they're structurally kind of the same, but they've been fine-tuned over those years. That underlying framework is kind of like our foundation, our base, our starting point. And it's based on things we're going to get into here. I kind of tried to break this down. I'm trying to break this down into like a practical framework to build the framework today. What's happened is that framework has existed, but then I use that when I'm talking to clients and agency partners, especially, is I don't know why I'm having trouble talking today. But when I'm using that framework, I then can build onto it. I can snap onto it. Certain things can adjust and make adjustments to fit into that particular situation. Because every situation is different. Every single client, every single partnership that I have with another agency is different. Sometimes very different. The role we adapt to what they need, kind of, whether it's, from a web design development perspective, it's, hey, these are the things we can do, but we might, we can do front end, back end, we can do really, really highly technical stuff, build stuff, custom to, helping with content. And so there's all kinds of different things we can do. And we just kind of snap into what is missing in that agency or with that client. And we fill those gaps. We extend a team. Maybe they are doing these things already, but they just need to do them more and better. And, or to make themselves more elastic and that they can do more. So that's basically it. And what I'm going to be talking about is that building that framework for services and then using that just as kind of a model underneath to actually then go to the conversation with that client, go to that call, go to those meetings and communicate that, and then work on listening, learning, how can we adjust it to meet their particular needs and snap into place. So that's what we're working on. Let's dig into foundational framework. If I was starting from scratch, and it doesn't even have to be web design development, whatever it is. It could be SEO, could be some digital marketing, could be whatever you're providing for clients for a service, right? Where do you start? Well, you start obviously with, what you do, I suppose. That's the beginning of the framework. But it's the thing with the framework, you want to build the pieces that are going to be consistent from contract to contract. So you got to figure out, answer some questions, and then build that into document it, map it out, document it, chart it, whatever you're going to do. This is what we're going to do. You break it down, For me, I even break things down by if it's a direct client versus a partner. have different pricing models and things like that. So I'm going to use kind of an example with like the type of contracts I have. So I have several different kinds of foundational contracts or frameworks, right? We have one of our biggest bread and butters is maintenance. It's like maintenance is huge because it's reoccurring, it's monthly RSAs, it's a big deal for us. And within that, I have figured out, what that pricing model looks like, what exactly we do, down to, 95% of what we do is WordPress. We're starting to, we do a lot of Shopify. We've always done Shopify as well. But still like a 5-10% or less of what we do. And then we're doing a Drupal thing all of a sudden where we have this last month, one of our newer client or agencies sent us a task, and it was Drupal. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm figuring out Drupal today. Who in my team knows Drupal? But so the maintenance contract is, what does that contract look like? Is it a monthly deal? Is it a quarterly? Are you going to offer quarterly or annual? Are you going to, what exactly is that? What does that service look like? What do we do? Do we do, how often do we update a website? How often, how are we going to report those things? Like, what does our notifications look like? And what is the ideal of everything? We have maintenance contracts that are very just security, just to keep it up to date, and it's done in production in the live site. We have others that are way more complex, where there's a whole flow to make updates much more carefully because they're higher revenue sites, e-commerce, and we might throw in other services on top of it. So our maintenance contracts can be all inclusive, where it still stays within our wheelhouse, but we might do some design work, we might do some content work, we might build out landing pages, we might do implementations of this and that, integrations, and maintain things beyond. We're doing server stuff or whatever. So there's this kind of, and there's different tiers to that. So I figured all that out with my maintenance. Same with custom websites. If we build a website for a client or another agency and their clients, I've figured out a framework and how we like to build them. Now we're flexible. We could use a page builder with WordPress and build it on that. We could, if they prefer, but we have kind of a core framework and core contract that's where I like, if it's up to us, this is what I use. And it's a full site editing block theme where we use an in-house framework. We have that exactly figured out. This is how we build it. And these are and then within that, like, what's the questionnaires look like? How do we, what are the questions we ask and all that stuff? That also exists. And then, so that's where it starts. And then I have my base costs. This is and again, difference between agencies and clients. But then we have add-ons. So if they need WooCommerce or e-commerce, if they need some kind of custom integration, those snap onto that. So I have all that figured out. So when I sit down in a meeting, I can give a pretty good ballpark of what something's going to cost. I can speak, I can listen and figure out what pieces of that they need. Like the all-inclusive, that's going to be different for every client. Some clients are really heavy on the paid advertising stuff and they need landing pages. Others just need this other type. Maybe they're more focused on SEO and performance. What is their concern? And that can change over time as well and adapt. So here are some questions. I'm just going to kind of throw these out. And these are some of the ones I would think would probably be top of the list, hopefully I'm not missing anything here. I just kind of threw this together this morning. But the first thing obviously is what you do, defining what you do. And as everybody knows, that's probably watching this, they know all about niching down and choosing your verticals and all that good stuff. But figure out what services you want to do and what you're not going to do. That's just as important. Like we do basic SEO, right? Basic on-site SEO. When we deliver a website, we're going to, WordPress out of the box has already, with Yoast is a good foundation for SEO, and that's on page, but we're not doing SEO services or anything like that. We're not doing other digital marketing services. We're focused on design, development, maintenance, and building that site, So we work with external designers, but we design in-house, but we might also, work with an external and be provided the design, or another CRO or whoever, conversion rate expert out there, or whatever, each one's a little bit different. And if we need videographers or photographers, or we need some other thing, we have partners that we can contact or bring into that project. It's a kind of a team network thing. But figure out what you do, and then figure out how you facilitate everything else, because there's a lot to building a website. In my case, and whatever service you're providing, there might be a lot. And what do you do when somebody goes outside of what you have defined what you do, right? There's an agency we've done work for over the last number of years. We've done several projects, and it's always a project that they don't do themselves, that it's custom. So they have like a kind of an on-rails way of doing things to building a website. They got a very specific way they like to build things. But if it goes outside of that, something custom, they talk to Matt. So they loop me in. So the other thing, how are you going to deliver it? What tools and services are you going to use? And what do they use? And how can you, work together with that? Like I have some agencies we work with that we have an agency that uses Teamwork. We have an agency that uses ClickUp. We have, we've had some, we don't right now, I don't think. Basecamp has been a thing. Asana. Can you work with those systems from a communication perspective? What other tools? What does the delivery itself look like? Do you do a lot of stuff behind the scenes and then just deliver what you deliver? Or is there have to be more integration between the teams? Figure that stuff out. Pricing models. Don't underprice. Make sure you got good, solid pricing models that, I use I have my base rates, and then I kind of do value pricing. There's kind of a structure to that, though. It's not like, just pulling a number out of a hat. There's reasons we'll price things a certain way, but you got to figure that stuff out. That's part of that framework. And then the contractual structure. How does that work? Are you going to have monthly? Are you going to have quarterly? Are you going to have those things? How do you handle additional scope that arises during a project? How do you invoice? What tools do you use for that? Are they okay with you sending an invoice in a particular way? Is there an hourly component? Is there all those things have to be figured out. That's your framework. How do you support the scaling and growth of your client over time? How do you build a team around them? Or an individual, and that maybe grows into a team. How does that happen? I think I touched on this a little bit, but have like an add-on structure as well to what you're doing. Like if something comes up, or when you're initially doing the contract, they need something additional. How do you add that on, or do you bring in that third party? What are your QA and standards? How do you maintain the quality you're delivering? That's part of your framework. You might have unique systems like we do. We have unique processes we've developed over years to deliver something and to QA it for quality assurance. So all those things, I think those are some of the biggest things that you need to think about. And there's probably other things, and it's probably dependent on your industry or what you're doing, but and who you serve. But you figure those things out. Excuse the interruption, but I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the sponsors of the Builders Podcast, Unified Web Design and Unified Plugins. At Unified Web Design, we specialize in crafting custom websites and providing comprehensive design and development solutions to help businesses build a strong online presence. Unified Plugins offers a suite of WordPress tools designed to help you create beautiful websites, enhance functionality, and drive conversions. Explore how these services can elevate your digital projects by visiting unifiedwebdesign.com and unifiedplugins.com. Now back to our program. And now that's your framework. That's your foundation. From there, now how I think of that contract. So I'll have these things literally in documents. I have every year I update my pricing. I have a pricing guide an internal pricing guide for maintenance and for custom sites. And then I have other documentation that will speak to different aspects of it. But it's all solidified. It's all in my brain. Most of it's in my brain. So when I show up to a call, it's there. It's all written down. It's figured out. It's thought through. Over time, that will adjust and change as you learn things. Every single project, every partnership, you're going to learn things, and you're going to go back to that initial framework, and you're going to tweak that framework and update it like you would a code base, right? Over time, you have some kind of framework to build a website or whatever. Over time, you're going to change things. You're going to use a different type of plugin. You're going to use, the standards change or things get deprecated and you can't use them anymore. It's the same with anything, right? Same with what we're talking about here. So you have to continually look at that as a kind of a live document over time that you update and you change at least a few times, once or a few times a year, you're going back to it. And is this still working? Or when you really learn that lesson, you just go right away and you go fix that. Or you might expand it. You'll figure out there's more things you can do. Or there's more opportunities there that you build into your framework. Now, one of the, I'm going to touch on a few examples, and I don't typically give you the names of the agencies we work with or clients, just because we do a lot of white label stuff, right? So we do work, that's part of our framework. We do work behind the scenes typically, but there's scenarios with agencies where it's kind of an unspoken thing. Like it's sort of white label. I get their company email and everything. I even communicate with clients. If, agency has clients, I have an email and I'm in there, as if I'm on their team, right? And with their company. But if they learn that I am a separate entity, it's never been a big deal. I don't think it's ever been a problem. I have proof of that in various ways, but basically it's usually not a problem because a lot of companies outsource and have partners and things like that. So it's kind of a normal way to do business, especially in the agency space. So, but I'm going to talk to a few of these, just to kind of give you some examples. Now, once you have that framework, now it has to adapt to various situations. And so you kind of set those the baseline criteria for things and what you do and all those things. Now, when you're in front of a client, when you have a client, or you have an opportunity, a prospect you're talking to, you have all of this to work with, and then they can, usually it's listening to what their needs are, their problems, their pain points, what they need solved. And then you can sort of look at your framework and say, okay, we can use this part of it. We do more of this. You could now adapt to that situation. So I'll give you one example of how this kind of worked with an agency we worked with for a number of years. They found me on LinkedIn, and they we jumped on a call, and next thing you know, we're doing business. We're building stuff for their clients, and in that situation, one of the reasons they brought us in was they weren't really a WordPress shop. They've been in business for decades. They use a different framework. So we came in as that expert, like we know WordPress inside out, down to the line of code, to every character in code. Now we do obviously this is our thing, right? And so they had an in-house team, that front-end developers, and they could build these sites, but they needed more technical knowledge to do bigger, more complex projects that involve more back-end WordPress, WooCommerce, and everything else. And so I was able to, number one, okay, this is what we're doing, right? Like we could be doing maintenance for them. We could be doing all these other things. Well, this is specifically the role we're going to fill. And then what does that pricing look like? What is our pricing? And in this case, we do hourly. So what is our hourly rate? And does that work for them based on how they bill? And then, what does the team look like that's going to help them? Figured those things out. And so you figure out your expertise, what we are going to do specifically for them. And then we design the pricing around that and everything. Am I going to be working directly with the clients? Am I going to be, and in this case, I do some on-site client stuff where I meet with the clients in various scenarios. Because a lot of stuff we do is virtual because we're all over the place, not just local, but in this case, it's a little bit more local. But we created a contract, where in this case, the contract is, so sometimes this isn't actually, you could consider an RSA agreement, but it's really, because it's hourly, it's just a monthly invoice. And we figured out from a contractual perspective, what our role is, what we'd be helping with, and they just pull us into things. A lot of these projects are one-off projects. They're building a feature, building a website, or helping finish build a website, or fix various problems. And that works fine in this case. So really it's almost like a hybrid of maintenance and custom work and WordPress work. So, but we came to the table with what we do and how we can solve their problems. And so it worked out good. So almost within, I guess there's different pieces to it. We have, we can do maintenance, we can do custom work, we can do everything, other things in between. But like I said, in this case, they needed us specifically for this, and then we price it around that. And then it was a matter of, okay, how we have a very kind of a methodology around how we communicate and work with external teams. They use Teamwork in this case. We use ClickUp. Well, how does that work? How does communication work? We do some maintenance, some monthly maintenance on some of their client sites. And that works we had to figure out specifically, like we know there's a notification situation where we have to let them know when we've updated or we're going to update. So we can't, we give them depending on the client or agency, it's going to be like a 24 or 48 hour notice. We're going to do doing these updates on this day. And so they know to keep, they're aware, right? And in some cases, it's even beyond that. There's a content freeze on the website, so we can do our thing. So they know, the client knows specific days that, they don't change anything. And that doesn't work in every scenario. Like e-commerce stores are going to be different than just plain content sites, stuff like that. but that's worked out really, really well with that agency. And then, when this happens, the contracts and situations can change over time. There's another agency we work with. This one we've only been working with maybe near a year, something like that. And in the beginning, it's been a slow process kind of bringing us in, and we solved some initial problems for them, which was related to maintenance. But again, I came to the table. What is your specific need? We do that. Here's how we do it. Here's how I recommend you do it. These are the pain points they have. They can't figure out how to get such and such a thing done. And then we worked out that notification process. The first few times we didn't actually have it. We started with a 24-hour notice, realized we needed a 48-hour notice because it gives their team more time to contact that client and get that content freeze in place. These are WP Engine sites, so there's a whole thing there where we have a staging site and we pull those updates, do the updates, test them. It's a whole thing, so it takes a couple days. But so that was one of the things from our framework, and then how we manage the hourly, how we bill an invoice. That's all there, and that all worked out fine. But there was other things we had to figure out. They also use ClickUp. So we had to figure out how two ClickUps work together, how we onboard projects, how we deliver them in that kind of environment. We use Slack. That's another thing, that we can bring to the table. These are tools that we already have and use. They use actually... It's a very strange, this agency is very strange because it seems like we're aligned a lot of ways. We use actually Front App now for all our email management, and it turns out they do too. They use ClickUp. They use Slack. That's a beautiful thing. Sometimes it just all works together. Other times you have to be a little bit more adaptable. But we adapt to it, though. If we want the contract, we have to figure out how to be flexible within what we do and work within their, kind of both teams have to work together and communicate and try things and test things and fail and then figure it out over time. We actually now have, with this agency, as of January, started an actual, up until this year, January, we were doing kind of the same kind of hourly, and that worked out okay on lower volume, but we've actually absorbed a lot more work now, and we settled on an RSA agreement monthly. But even in this first month, so we're into like a little over halfway through the first month, I already realized that this contract's going to have to be adjusted or something's going to have to happen there, because we had set hours in that contract and everything, but we're already almost burned through them. So we're going to have to figure that out. So the contract will expand, or something's got to change there, or those conversations will happen. But again, it's flexible. So, it's kind of built into it. We have kind of, when we do things like that, it's almost like a trial period, right? We jump in with both feet. I've actually hired a project manager just for this agency, for this particular project. It's more than one project, but for everything that's coming from this agency, just a project manager just for that. And that's working out great. Everything's working out pretty good. There's always little things you gotta, solve and stuff along the way, or something, just issues and stuff to figure out. But the underlying framework itself is great. The invoicing is great. The communication is great. It's just the volume thing we have to figure out. It's a lot. It's a lot. There's like multiple project managers we're now communicating with, and all this stuff coming at us, and then small little things, larger things, and potentially other things we're doing. It's a lot that happened in a few weeks. part of my hockey stick thing going on, but, and they're not the only one. There's other things, but, so, can't plan for those things. Sometimes you just gotta just roll with it. But that's my point is with that one, I think, is just that's an illustration of how, in the beginning, you have the initial talks, initial meetings about, how we can solve their needs, what we do. But over time, you kind of, as you work together, you prove yourselves, you like each other. All those things are important. And then new opportunities arise out of that, but then you still have to continually adapt and change and tweak, whether it's down to the notifications you send out for something specific to how you deliver a project, understanding, what that client or agency, even what their verbal communications are like. There's so many nuances between agencies and how they do things and how they speak to things and construct things, or how they even write a task up, right? How they name the task. Everything is just, you got to learn all that along the way, but you'd adapt. But what starts that is that underlying framework, and that many of those components never change. You just adjust them. So the last one, is kind of very similar. My last kind of example here is pretty similar. This is actually a direct client, but this is a scenario we've been doing work for this client for just short of 4 years. I think it's just almost 4 years. And in that time frame, a lot's changed, a lot's happened. But the underlying contract really hasn't changed that much. It's just the scope of work has. And as their business develops, when we first started, we actually we had one website that we were managing. It was an e-commerce store, big, like multi-million-dollar business, but they have multi-million dollars in revenue. Hundreds of sales a day going through an e-commerce store is kind of crazy. But we handled it. we got her. We still have the contract. But what happens over time, they actually had a secondary site that they had a kind of a satellite site, similar product, but it's on Shopify. So the first one's on WordPress, that one's on Shopify, but they didn't do much with that first few years. Yeah, we would work on it here and there, fix problems and stuff, but, so it wasn't really part of the core contract. It was kind of separate. I think I threw a few hours in. If you needed a few hours, we can handle it. But other larger things, building something out on that, it would have been separate. But now they launched a new product. We launched a new website for them this past year for a whole new product, completely different type of product. And that we've kind of landed, besides that whole project as a standalone, we're now at some point this past year, we added a dedicated part-time developer. It's a sizable contract, but we kind of worked as a team. It wasn't, I had dedicated people kind of on it to do the maintenance and keep the sites updated and fix things and all that. But it wasn't like we needed a dedicated to do a specific type of stuff, like front end work and building out landing pages, design work, help with A/B split testing, all this stuff we do. So we needed somebody dedicated to do that. But the last month specifically, they had a huge initiative to update all 3 websites pretty majorly. They brought on board other agencies to help them, CROs, and it was this huge initiative to improve conversions and get the websites in tip-top shape. And these last few weeks it was so crazy that my wife hasn't seen me much on the weekends either. So I had one developer working on one site. I had another developer working on the Shopify site. Like one developer on the original site, Shopify site, and then the new site. That was me. I took that one. Like, okay, I'll do this. It looked like I could, yeah, no problem. There's a lot. It's rebuilding how the checkout works and is designed, a complete rebuild of that and the product page and home page, some things, which what turned out to be a lot, but but that's how I'm like, I can tackle this. This is really good too, because it's good for me to get in the code once in a while, and it for me, it's important to, still feel connection to the craft. So that helps me, helps my team, understand how to build things and things, and learn new things about how WordPress and WooCommerce work today. And then we actually, with this project, we actually built a custom plugin, a payment plugin for a reason. And it's an HSA, FSA thing. I think it's a health savings account thing. That now we're on like 40 to 50% of all e-commerce stores. Well, the company or agency that provided this ability didn't have a WordPress plugin. So we had to kind of build that from scratch using their API and everything. So we're doing all that the last few weeks. And And at the end, we just launched all these things all at once this last week. Could have been worse, kind of usual stuff. We didn't. It was kind of on a tight deadline too, so we didn't do as heavy a QA as we normally do. But the client understood that. But we did pretty good. Things are in good shape. But my point here with telling you this is that was a huge rush. And we had this other new agency thing I just talked about, all at the same time. Onboarding a new project manager, doing all this. Like, that was my month of January and halfway through February. But at the end of this, it didn't even go as fast as my client wanted. Now, we can only build a big enough at some point you're tripping over each other, right? Too many people working on things. And then project managing all that, it's a whole thing. But at the end, he's like, we had talked about increasing, getting a full-time dedicated developer on this and just expanding that team. And he sent me, and I talked to him about multiple times this past year, but he'd always kind of brush it off. I think they wanted to get themselves to a certain point, and they're investing in all this other stuff. But he's finally like, I think it's time. We need to think about that. Let's have a meeting on Monday. So Monday, which is very soon, this next Monday, when this comes out, actually, we will be having that conversation. And now that contract it's a contract that's changed only once in the last 4 years. It changed once when they had, I don't know 100% what the catalyst was, but they were having, the revenue went down, and it would have been COVID. I don't know. Their revenue went down, and so I had to actually shrink the contract. And it was sitting at less of a contract for a while, and we were doing less things. But then we had to increase it this past year, adding that dedicated and increasing it back up to help them facilitate everything they're doing. And then, but now, like after this, and he's talking to me like, they have a lot planned this year. They're going to be doing a lot of A/B split testing. They're going to be doing a lot of building landing pages and doing a lot more stuff on all 3 websites. And that's what he said. I think it was Friday or Thursday. He said, Matt, we have 3 websites now. I think it's time. And I think they're that one they were ignoring for a while. They're going to be now putting more energy in now that we have it updated and looking nice. So what I do is we look at that initial contract. the most of the pieces won't change. Most of that framework we initially had, but what will change is just the amount of resources and how we manage it all, and um, and obviously the pricing will increase. Um, but overall, what we're doing doesn't change too much. However, we're also talking about every when something like that happens, when you have a huge spike in work and requirements, and you have a client you care about and want to do the best you can for. It's my role also to identify and call out where there's problems, right? And there were a few problems, like there was some communication problems where our usual role is different when other parties are involved and other agencies are coming to design and input on things. And so there was some expectations that on us. For me, it's logical because I know how these things work, but it wasn't so much for the client. So we're going to talk not only structurally about the pricing and resources, but how we'll approach projects going forward, how we can improve on our communications and how we do things, approach things. And he's confident that we'll do better, but we'll see. I'm sure we will. It's kind of one of those clients you feel like probably lifelong until I retire someday, or maybe even after. Who knows? Hopefully somebody will take over my agency someday. That's the goal, right? So, but all three of those illustrate that, they all are kind of built on the same framework, and they just adapt based on what that agency or that client's needs are. We're doing the same things. What we do hasn't changed, or what we can do. Our guardrail, like none of these clients are we doing SEO or advertising or anything outside. Even though Matt has some of that experience, I made a conscious decision years ago that this is no. We're going to focus. We do design, graphics, web design, do web development, coding, programming, building features, doing integrations, API stuff, all the stuff. We'll do we'll optimize servers and set up servers and manage your server. We manage servers. We don't have custom servers or anything. But all that is there. And then each one of these, that it kind of snaps into that, and each one adapts to their needs, and it also changes. It's flexible in that you know how you construct it, and then I was visualizing how you make it like a like a print of something, like a 3D printing situation. You print it. This is what we're doing. This is within these things. But then over time, that 3D print, you can reprint it, change the blueprint, reprint it. I don't know. That's the first time using that as an analogy. I don't know if that works, but that's essentially it. It really is. It's adaptable process, just like the name of this video is going to be, flexible, adaptable service framework. You create, even though it's flexible and adaptable, you still need a foundation. You still need to answer those questions I talked about. Know what your pricing model is, know what your contractual structure looks like, what your standards will be, what you deliver, how you deliver, all that good stuff. And then and then you can make it flexible. And then, because if you're not flexible, if I wasn't flexible, if I was too narrow in what I do, I wouldn't be working with any of these clients. If I had just this is all we do, we're not going to adapt. We only use these tools. You're going to have to work within our systems. It's done. At least in my realm, it doesn't work. I joke all the time. I said, I thought in the beginning that I could like talk everybody into using all the tools that we use, like do things our way. And then I realized, well, if I want business now, I probably tried, and I might recommend still, but it is what it is. But hopefully this, was educational in the fact, like when you're thinking about if you're somebody that's, whether you already have contracts in place or, services, productized services, whatever, what you do, you got kind of some of this stuff fleshed out. Maybe this made you think about certain aspects of what you do, and then maybe making it okay to have it, something that's flexible and adaptable. That's actually part of it. I mean, that's where add-ons come in. That's where even flexibility in how, the monetary side of it is handled per agency. Maybe it's a little different, how it's structured. But at the end of the day, you got to kind of define for yourself how flexible you want to be. But yeah, that's it. That is it. Build something, make sure you have it in writing, make sure you have it documented, make sure you revisit it once or a couple times a year, at least, maybe once a quarter for you, maybe once a month for you, whatever works and makes sense in your, how complicated your business is, making sure you've defined what you do and aren't going to do. Or if you don't do something, how you going to still facilitate that or refer that business or bring in a third party. Figuring that stuff out up front is good. But know it'll change over time. As you learn things, as your network grows, more opportunities will come along. I can have stuff done now that I couldn't a few years ago because of new connections. It's a beautiful thing. So I hope you found this interesting and insightful, and it's good talking to you again. I will talk to you next time we do another solo episode. Who knows what it'll be, because, I don't think about what I'm going to talk about until pretty much the day of. So, but now we've talked about products last time. We've talked about kind of building these kind of services and some examples within that, that's what I really like to share. We talk a lot about building, and really the core of this is just, building great services that have that underlying framework, but are adaptable and flexible. That is the whole thing. That is what we talked about today. Yeah, you take care of yourself. Hope business is well. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great 2025 or whatever year you're listening to this. Until next time, take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Builders Podcast. One more quick note about our sponsors. At Unified Web Design, we're passionate about doing better together, partnering with agencies and businesses to deliver exceptional web design, development, and ongoing support. And Unified Plugins offers tools to take your WordPress projects to the next level, helping you build beautiful websites, enhance functionality, and drive more conversions. If you haven't already, subscribe or follow to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, sharing it with somebody who might benefit helps us grow this amazing community. Until next time, keep building with intention and creativity.